What do men want?
Manifests itself in relationships, and you feel it in relationships, and they can be very powerful spiritually. And if that's what you need, that's what you should go for.
And she said, oh, I'm going to go do a sweat lodge this evening. And I begged her to take me along, and that was about 6 years ago.
Welcome to Speaking of Men. You're watching public access television from Albuquerque, New Mexico. I'm your host, Mike Rivas, and today we're speaking with Steve Hoffman, founder of Hawkwatch, a nonprofit organization here in New Mexico that's working for the preservation of birds of prey, or raptors. Welcome to the show, Steve.
Pleasure. Thanks, Mike. Pleasure to be here.
Pleasure to have you. Want to tell us about your friend a little bit?
I'd love to. This is a red-tailed hawk, the most common hawk in North America, one of many different species of raptors we have here in New Mexico and throughout the country. And this is a bird that weighs about 3 pounds, has a wingspan of 4 feet, and we have her because she was permanently injured, and makes a great educational tool to reach people about environmental issues.
You were telling me she sees about 7 times as well as we do.
Yes, because these birds are hunters. They really need to have the kind of vision to spot prey at a great distance. They also soar very high in the sky so they can survey lots of country, and with that kind of eyesight they can spot their prey quite easily.
How high up does she get?
Well, that's really a good question, and we're not sure, but in some cases they may fly a couple of miles above the ground surface.
And they can, how well can they see from up there?
Well, they can see extremely well, and of course when they get that high, sometimes they're doing that when they're migrating, right, as opposed to just hunting, or they may just go out and soar just for fun.
No, they basically they glide, I guess, a lot, and use wings and...
Yeah, these birds really need to conserve energy, so they glide and soar and look for updrafts, either thermal or ridge updrafts, where they can gain altitude without having to work too hard.
That's absolutely great. And you were saying she hears about as well as you and I do.
Yes, and perhaps a little bit better, and some raptors hear better than others. For example, owls have extremely good hearing and can actually capture their prey by hearing alone, without even seeing it.
Without even seeing it.
And there's one species of hawk that can do that, and that's the harrier.
Harrier, and that's a smaller bird.
It's a little bit smaller and tends to hunt in marshlands where the vegetation is so tall they cannot see their prey.
How fast can she fly?
Well, when they're diving, this hawk can probably dive at speeds of up to 80 to 100 miles an hour as they're pursuing their prey. Some raptors may dive at speeds of up to 150, 200 miles an hour.
They use those tail feathers back there as the brake, basically.
Yeah, brake and a rudder.
And a rudder.
So they can turn.
Yeah, I always notice when they're flying, they have those little fingers kind of out at the ends of the wings that it looks like they maneuver things with. Beautiful, beautiful creature. Tell us a little bit about why you founded Hawkwatch. Now, your background is in the preservation of endangered species, you were telling me.
Yeah, actually, I was trained as a biologist, and I used to work for the government, first for the Bureau of Land Management, and then later for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service as an endangered species biologist. My job was to try to bring back a variety of different bird species that were threatened with extinction, bring them back from the brink so that we no longer needed to be concerned about their welfare. And frankly, I became rather discouraged with the program because all the species I was working with were so close to extinction, and their habitat was basically gone. the chance of us successfully bringing them back was really very small. And I learned that the main reason why we were having such difficulty with the program is we often waited until the 11th hour, until the species was on the brink of extinction. And really the best time to save a species is when it's still common, in the initial stages of its decline. And by working with these birds, we not only can monitor their health, but use them as environmental indicators, as barometers of environmental problems, so that we can discover these problems and reverse them before it reaches a crisis point.
I know they are able to trace insecticides through the food chain using...
Well, that actually is perhaps the best example, Mike, is the example of DDT. Rachel Carson wrote her book, Silent Spring, in 1962, and many people believe that was the beginning of the environmental movement in this country. And the result of her book was a great public awareness as to the problem of pesticides. And she made her case against pesticides by referring quite often to data being gathered in eastern North America on these birds, and the declines in our national symbol, the bald eagle, declines in peregrine falcons, and many other species of birds of prey.
That's how many types of raptors have we lost?
Well, in terms of extinction, in North America, we have not yet lost any species of raptors. Worldwide, we've lost very few. But there is one species of raptor, the California condor, that is extremely rare, and basically all the remaining individuals are in captivity. Then there's another species, that the aplomado falcon, that still occurs in Mexico, but has disappeared from the United States, essentially, over the last 30 years.
We have some public service announcements coming up here from the Forest Service and from the energy conservation people here in the United States. So what we're hoping is that our viewers will stay with us, and Steve Hoffman and I will be right back.
Hello. Research indicates we Americans create too much garbage. So I have spent years developing worms that eat garbage at an astonishing rate. Some eat more than others.
There's an easier way to save the world. Recycle. To find out more, dial 1-800-CALL-EDF.
The animals in the forest. If they could talk, what would they say? They might say, be careful with fire in the forest. Just like Smokey says, only you can prevent forest fires.
Welcome back to Speaking of Men. My name is Mike Rivas. I'm your host, and we're fortunate today to have Mr. Steve Hoffman of the Hawkwatch organization and his friend Redford, who was nice enough to come down and join us. What kind of hawk is Redford?
A red-tailed hawk, Mike.
Red-tailed hawk.
Yeah, the most common hawk in all of North America.
Let's tell me a little bit about why you founded Hawkwatch and your goals and the purposes and that kind of thing.
Well, to start out, I think it's important to have in perspective the fact that the environment is probably the most important issue of our day. And my work with the Fish and Wildlife Service's Endangered Species Office made me a little bit discouraged about our success in reversing the declines of extremely endangered animals and plants. And by using these birds as environmental barometers, we will have an opportunity to discover problems a little bit earlier and reverse them so that we don't have to wait until there's a crisis. I think another thing that I'm learning more and more about the value of raptors in our society is that most of us live in the city. We've lost our connection to nature. We've lost that spiritual connection to the natural world. And because birds of prey are accessible, because of birds like this red-tail that cannot be released and really adapt quite well. For example, she is under no stress at all right now. She's perfectly calm, and she gives people a chance to connect with wild nature. People that might otherwise not have a chance to become acquainted and learn to appreciate a little bit of nature. And so we can take her into classrooms, into any kind of urban setting, and really give people an appreciation for the natural world and really stress the need to preserve the environment. I think by working with a predator, we can really emphasize the interrelationships in nature, the predator-prey, and the fact that we humans are part of that ecosystem. And if we take care of these birds and we take care of the planet, in the long run, we're really taking care of ourselves, our children, our grandchildren, and we're making way for future generations. If we otherwise destroy nature, then we're doing something that ethically is wrong and really may affect our own, not only our own quality of life, but our own opportunity for survival in the future. It's a serious issue, and people take for granted the fact that we go to the grocery store and we stock up and we have all of our needs met. But in the long run, the only way human needs can be met is if we have healthy ecosystems with clean water, clean air, and we can grow food, and without that, we don't have a chance.
That's absolutely true, isn't it? Well, let's see. Give me some of the idea of the services that you provide
Sure.
and some of the functions that you...
Sure. One of the things that Hawkwatch is doing is we're looking at the big picture over the long term through these birds. And many of these birds actually leave their northern breeding areas and spend the winter at more southern areas where they can find their food.
Northern being?
Well, they may nest in Canada, the northern Rocky Mountains, all the way north to Alaska. And these birds migrate. They fly south in the fall. And if you happen to be able to find a funneling point, a flyway for these birds, you can actually measure the status and trends in populations of many different species of hawks, eagles, and falcons along these flyways. So what Hawkwatch does...
And we have one of those here, don't we?
Well, we actually have two right here in central New Mexico, which is the only state in the West that we have discovered two major flyways for birds of prey. We have a spring flyway in the Sandia Mountains, where we record and count 3,000 to 5,000 hawks of 18 different species from mid-February until early May each spring. And then in the fall, when the birds are coming back south, we have observers stationed in the Manzano Mountains. And here we count 3,000 to 5,000 hawks moving south. And by doing these counts year after year, we can measure the status and trends of these birds and the ecosystems that support these birds. And each species of hawk, or eagle, or falcon has its own particular habitat requirements. So depending on how that species is doing, that tells us something about that entire ecosystem, which supports a number of other plants and animals, and the human species too.
That's grand stuff. I have a little book that a fellow named, German count named Maximilian came over with a painter named Bodmer back at the height of the fur trade in the early, in the late 1700s in America, and went up, and they had one bill of lading of furs coming down the Missouri that had like 30,000 buffalo bull, 20,000 silver fox, et cetera, and et cetera. This land was a bountiful place 200 years ago. And I'm wondering, how could someone become involved with you guys and support you if they wanted to?
Well, actually, one of the exciting things about Hawkwatch is that we get people involved. Anyone can help us with our counts. They can come up on the mountain and help us spot and count and identify the birds. We also have an educational program. We take live injured hawks, like this bird here, into school classrooms and talk about environmental issues with the kids. And we're looking for volunteers to help us there as well. There's a broad range of activities that we need volunteers for. And we also are capturing and tagging the birds. We capture them and put a band on their leg, which has a number on it that no other bird has. And this gives us information on the origins and destinations of these migrating populations of birds. And we've now captured and banded, for example, over 17,000 birds of prey over the last 10 years. And we need volunteers to help us with that, both here in New Mexico, and another major flyway where we study is in Nevada. In fact, we have now 6 flyway sites that we study in the West in 5 different states, and we're also operating a project in Mexico in cooperation with a Mexican conservation organization and another conservation organization back in Pennsylvania. So we're involved in monitoring the birds, learning more about their migration patterns, and public outreach through education programs in schools and public events. And we really would like to get people involved. And we have a volunteer training program where we train people to handle these birds, and we teach them about the life histories of birds of prey, and then also train them to give public programs.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how effective do you feel attempts at making the public aware and making a difference in positively changing some of the predation that's happening?
Well, you know, probably the most important problems in the environment right now are long-term problems. Problems like the fact that the ozone in the upper stratosphere is getting thinner. More and more ultraviolet radiation is reaching the Earth's surface.
I know that because they cut chunks out of me about once a year because of it.
Yeah. And we're going to see increasing rates of skin cancer throughout the coming decades because of that. The planet is warming up because we are increasing the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. It's called the greenhouse effect. Our forests are disappearing. In fact, in just the time that you and I have had this chat, we have seen probably 2 or 3 species of plants or animals go extinct on this planet. Of course, once a species goes extinct, it's gone forever. And when we lose that amazing biological diversity, we are taking away opportunities for our children's survival.
And a part of us dies too.
That's right.
It's you were saying, what was the word we were trying to get a definition on, that the Earth is a living...
Gaia, the Gaia concept.
Mm-hmm.
The Earth is a living organism.
Mm-hmm.
And if we take any part of it away, one species, one ecosystem, like the tropical forest, which is disappearing, that entire organism is weakened. And the only way you and I and everyone else on this planet can survive and have a high quality of life is if this organism is healthy.
You
and
know,
we are killing it.
Early Jewish mysticism believed that the Earth was an angel, the other lights in the sky and stars and planets were angels, and that they were beings, and that we're just kind of like the most evolved consciousness that this particular being has right now. One of the tragedies, I think, in consciousness is the fact that we somehow think that we are separate from her, that we are somehow separate from trees or the forest or streams.
Right. Right, and that is part of the Gaia concept, and the fact is that we are part of this living organism, and we have a choice that we can make. We can choose to live in harmony with all the other, the miracle of life on this planet, or we can choose to destroy it and in the process destroy ourselves. By taking care of these birds, we're really taking care of ourselves. These birds serve as a messenger about what's happening out there on the earth, and I think people are paying attention. And as I travel around and talk to people and take this bird and expose this bird to children and to adults, to people from all walks of life, and get them involved in our research and in saving these birds, people are listening. People do value other forms of life and do see themselves as part of the living organism of the earth. And I think there is hope, but we all must take greater responsibility for the damage that we have done in our technological society, and the fact that we don't have much time left. We really have to make some very rapid changes in our value system, in our lifestyles, in the resources that we consume. And of course, we Americans are some of the greatest consumers of natural resources on the planet. We are 6% of the world's population. We are consuming 35% of the world's resources. And so there are lots of things that we can do to simplify our lives and to consume less. And we need to be thinking about that, as well as becoming more active in politics and making sure that decisions that are being made in Washington, D.C. Are decisions that will help our children and be looking at the long term, not just what's happening next week or next month. We need to be thinking long term and what we do today and how that's going to affect our well-being, our quality of life in next decade and 2 or 3 decades down the road.
Yeah, if we lose her, the sky's diminished, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
We have a short tape from our producer, Michael Kruchowski, that covers one of our ongoing projects of interest and hope. And we hope you'll stay with us, because we will be right back.
In September 1990, William J. Scott began looking for his son Billy, whom he hadn't seen in more than 6 years. Unknown to William, Billy also began a search for his father a few weeks later. In early December, Billy Scott appeared with us on Speaking of Men, hoping to get the word to his father. If you know William J. Scott, won't you help us reunite them? Here's what we know about Billy's father. William J. Scott was reported to have been living in the Albuquerque area for the past 5 years. He's 31 years old, 6 foot 1 inches tall, with brown hair and blue eyes. He may have been working in a local sawmill or lumber yard, though he may be contemplating a move to Alaska. If you have any idea where William J. Scott is, please tell him to call me, Mike Kruchowski, at 268-5260, and we'll find a way to get father and son together again.
Welcome back to Speaking of Men. I'm your host, Mike Rivas, and we're speaking with Stephen Hoffman of Hawkwatch, and his friend Redford is joining us today, who is a red-tailed hawk, because she has a red tail, no doubt. Absolutely,
No doubt.
Absolutely beautiful critter. Tell us, Steve, a little bit about what kind of results you guys are getting. Are we winning or losing, or what's happening?
Okay. First of all, I should make it clear that we're in this for the long term, and it's only possible to find out how these birds are doing if we look at years and years of data. And we now have a database which includes 4 different sites, 1 in Nevada, 1 in Utah, and 2 in New Mexico, where we have between 7 and 9 years of data. And so we've done an analysis of that to see how these birds are doing in the wild. And we found that at least 2 species seem to be on the slide, and a couple of species are also on the increase. So we've got some good news and some bad news. First I'll give you the good news. One of the most damaging, threatening aspects of our society over the last several decades for these birds has been the use of pesticides. And perhaps the most serious pesticide has been DDT, which was used widely from the late 40s through 1972.
Not good for people either.
No. In fact, it's a human carcinogen. And it's fortunate that by studying these birds, we learned about the problem and banned the chemical before it became a serious human health risk. Unfortunately, many of the species of birds of prey did decline drastically during the 50s and 60s. We're now seeing those species rebound as a result of our banning of that chemical. Species like the peregrine falcon, our national symbol, the bald eagle, the osprey, which feeds on fish, which also accumulates large amounts of DDT, the merlin, which is a small falcon. So these species seem to be on the rise, and that's some really good news. On the negative side, there are 2 species that we're very concerned about and feel need to be watched very closely. One of those is the golden eagle. We've seen declines in golden eagles now since the late 1970s in Utah and since the early 80s here in New Mexico. And we suspect that there may be something going on long term that we need to pay attention to. Golden eagles depend on a kind of a shrub desert environment and feed mostly on rabbits. And if that particular ecosystem is in a decline, is not functioning in a healthy manner, we're going to see less food and less cover for rabbits and less prey, of course, for eagles. Eagle populations will then decline. The other species that we're concerned about is the northern goshawk, which is a forest species. It lives in old-growth forests, much like the spotted owl. And of course, we've heard a lot about spotted owls over the last several years. And one of the things that may be happening there is, both with the spotted owl and the northern goshawk, is we're just cutting down trees in a manner that's not consistent with preserving the health of the forest ecosystem. Much of these forests are being clear-cut. And rather than selectively cutting the trees and cutting them over a longer rotation period, we often go into these forests and just cut everything, and we change a forest to a meadow, and that destroys many forest species and destroys the ecosystem in the long run. And the goshawk is an indicator of the health of that ecosystem, and we're seeing a steady decline in that species.
So the two were the goshawk
and the golden eagle.
And the golden eagle.
We're concerned about those two species.
You know, we're down to about 2 minutes.
Okay.
Why don't you take a minute and a half and tell our viewers how someone could get in touch with Hawkwatch and be involved in...
Okay, sounds good. First of all, I want to mention that right now the spring migration is going on. And everyone has an opportunity to take a 2-mile hike up to the south end of the Sandias, starting at Three Gun Spring Trailhead just east of Albuquerque. And you may see anywhere from 10 or 20 raptors all the way up to as many as 100 birds of prey of several different species in a single day. And we invite you to come up and watch hawks with us. If you'd like more information, call us at 255-7622. That's our main office number right here in Albuquerque. And I invite you to also just come on by and see us. We have T-shirts, we have books. We'd love to have you get to know birds of prey better and have you get involved in our organization, either in our education programs or in our field work.
And people can adopt a hawk, too.
That's right. In fact, we have a unique gift idea we call Adopt a Hawk, and it's a kind of a membership program that includes a beautiful color photo of one of the birds that we've captured and tagged with all the information about your bird. And you also get updates on the status of your wild bird. These are wild birds that we have captured and banded and then released back to the wild. We put up for adoption. It's a way to support the program and learn more about the birds, and it's a great idea for kids too.
So it's just a way to allow just a fragment of your life to wander free, isn't it?
Yes, exactly.
Stephen, and I'd like to thank you for coming down for Hawkwatch today. In Redford, we'd like to thank you for being here. You're watching Speaking of Men. This is public access television from Albuquerque, New Mexico. I'm your host, Mike Rivas, telling you to stand if you can, run if you have to, but don't quit.